Captain Sarah Martinez adjusted her helmet one final time as she walked across the tarmac toward her F-16 Fighting Falcon. The morning sun cast long shadows across the airfield at Bagram Air Base, Afghanistan, and the familiar smell of jet fuel mixed with desert dust filled her nostrils. At 28, she had logged over 800 flight hours, but today felt different. Today, she was flying as the 7th aircraft in a 6-plane formation. The mission briefing had been straightforward enough. Intelligence indicated a high-value target compound in the Kunar province, suspected of housing Taliban leadership planning attacks on coalition forces. 6 F-16s would provide close air support for a joint special operations ground assault. Sarah's aircraft was designated as backup, flying in reserve position with minimal ordnance load. The mission planners had made it clear that her role was purely precautionary. Viper 7, you're flying cleanup duty today, Major Thompson had said during the briefing, barely looking up from his tactical display. Stay high, stay back, and only engage if specifically called upon. We've got this covered with the primary 6. Sarah had nodded professionally, but the designation stung. After 3 combat deployments and a spotless flight record, being relegated to backup status felt like a step backward. She understood the tactical reasoning, but it didn't make the pill any easier to swallow. The other pilots in her squadron respected her abilities, but she knew some of the brass still questioned whether women belonged in fighter cockpits during high-stakes operations. As she conducted her pre-flight inspection, Sarah methodically checked every surface, connection, and system on her aircraft. Her crew chief, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, had prepared the F-16 to perfection. The aircraft carried a light load, 2 AM-9 Sidewinder air-to-air missiles, 1 AM-120 AMRAAM, and a single GBU-12 Paveway-2 laser-guided bomb. Not exactly the heavy strike package the primary aircraft were carrying. She's ready to go, Captain, Rodriguez called out, giving her a thumbs up from beside the aircraft. Brought you back safe from 47 missions. She'll bring you back from 48. Sarah smiled and returned the gesture. Rodriguez had been her crew chief for 2 years, and his meticulous attention to detail had never failed her. She trusted him with her life every time she strapped into the cockpit. The relationship between pilot and crew chief was sacred in the fighter community, built on mutual respect and shared responsibility for mission success. Climbing into the cockpit, Sarah began her startup procedures with practiced efficiency. The F-16 systems came online one by one, each green light confirming that her aircraft was ready for combat. She ran through her communications checks, confirming contact with flight lead, the airborne command and control aircraft, and the ground assault team they would be supporting. Viper flight. This is Viper lead, came the voice of Lieutenant Colonel Harrison over the radio. Weather is clear, winds favorable. We're looking at a textbook mission today. Viper 7, maintain high cover at 25,000 feet and stay ready for tasking. Viper 7 copies, Sarah responded, keeping her voice steady and professional despite her frustration with the assignment. The formation taxied to the runway in sequence, 6 primary aircraft followed by Sarah's backup fighter. As they waited for final clearance, Sarah reviewed the intelligence package one more time. The target compound sat in a valley surrounded by steep terrain, with limited approach routes and multiple defensive positions. The ground team would fast rope from helicopters while the F-16s provided overwatch and precision strikes as needed. Intelligence reports suggested minimal surface-to-air missile threats, but the terrain itself posed significant challenges. The mountains created radar shadows and communication dead zones, while the narrow valleys offered limited maneuvering room for close air support operations. Sarah had flown similar missions before and knew how quickly situations could change in that type of environment. Tower, Viper flight ready for departure, Harrison called out. Viper flight cleared for takeoff. Winds light and variable. Good hunting. One by one, the F-16s thundered down the runway and lifted into the crystal-clear Afghan morning sky. Sarah was the last to take off, and as her aircraft climbed through 10,000 feet, she could see the rest of the formation already establishing their tactical spacing ahead of her. The familiar sensation of flight helped ease some of her disappointment about the mission assignment. The flight to the target area took 45 minutes, following a route designed to avoid known anti-aircraft positions in populated areas. Sarah maintained her position high above the primary formation, monitoring multiple radio frequencies and keeping track of the developing tactical picture. The ground assault team was 15 minutes out, approaching in Black Hawk helicopters under cover of darkness that was just beginning to fade. As they neared the target area, Sarah could see the rugged landscape of eastern Afghanistan spreading out below. The mountains rose like jagged teeth from the earth, their peaks still shrouded in morning mist. Somewhere in those valleys, coalition forces were about to engage in a dangerous mission that could save countless lives if successful. Viper 7. This is Viper Lead. Harrison's voice crackled over the radio. Take up high cover at 25,000 feet, bearing 090 from the target. Maintain radio discipline and stay alert. Viper 7 taking high cover, Sarah acknowledged, banking her aircraft toward the assigned position. From her vantage point high above the battlefield, Sarah had an excellent view of the entire area of operations. Her aircraft's sensors and radar systems gave her a comprehensive picture of everything happening below, from the approaching helicopters to the movement of the other F-16s into their attack positions. She settled in for what she expected to be a long period of waiting and watching. The morning sun climbed higher in the sky, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right about this mission. The intelligence seemed almost too clean, too straightforward for an operation in this part of Afghanistan. In her experience, the enemy rarely made things easy for coalition forces. But orders were orders, and her job was to stay ready and follow commands. As the ground assault team reached their insertion point, Sarah keyed her microphone to check in with the formation lead. What happened next would test every skill she had learned in her years of training and combat experience, proving that sometimes the most important player in any mission is the one nobody expects to matter. The first sign of trouble came at 06:47 hours, just as the ground assault team was beginning their final approach to the target compound. Sarah was maintaining her high cover position when her radar warning receiver began chirping insistently. The distinctive tone indicated a surface-to-air missile system had just gone active somewhere in the valley below. Viper Lead, Viper 7. Sarah called immediately. I'm showing SAM activity, bearing 270 from the target. Looks like SA-8 system coming online. Viper 7, Viper Lead copies, Harrison responded. We're not showing anything down here.
Can you confirm?
Sarah quickly cross-referenced her displays and ran a diagnostic on her electronic warfare systems. Everything checked out perfectly. Her aircraft sensors were detecting a mobile surface-to-air missile battery that had somehow avoided detection during the intelligence preparation phase. The SA-8 was a particularly dangerous threat to low-flying aircraft, capable of engaging targets at altitudes where the F-16s would need to operate for close air support. Viper Lead, confirmed SA-8 system. Signal strength indicates it's approximately 3 kilometers west of the primary target. They're scanning but haven't locked on to anyone yet. Below her, Sarah could see the 6 primary F-16s continuing their approach to their assigned sectors around the target compound. From their lower altitude, their radar warning systems might not pick up the SAM site until it was too late. The mountainous terrain was masking the threat signature, creating a dangerous blind spot that could prove fatal. Ground Team Viper Lead, Harrison called to the Special Operations Forces. Be advised, possible SAM threat in your area of operations. Viper Lead Ground Team copies. We're committed to insertion. Can you suppress the threat? Sarah watched as the formation began maneuvering to address the surface-to-air missile site, but something else was happening on her scope that made her blood run cold. Multiple radar signatures were appearing from positions that should have been empty. The intelligence had been wrong. Dead wrong. Viper Lead, Viper 7. Sarah's voice carried new urgency. I'm counting at least 4 additional radar signatures. This looks like a coordinated air defense network. The target area is heavily defended. What had been briefed as a lightly defended compound was revealing itself to be a sophisticated trap. The enemy had used the high-value target as bait, positioning multiple air defense systems in overlapping fields of fire. They had waited until the coalition forces were committed to the attack before activating their defenses. All Viper aircraft, this is Viper Lead. Be advised, threat level has escalated significantly. Ground Team, recommend you abort insertion. Negative, Viper Lead, came the reply from the ground commander. We're 30 seconds from fast rope. Need immediate suppression of air defenses. Sarah watched the tactical situation developing with growing alarm. The 6 primary F-16s were now maneuvering in a valley that had become a killing field. Multiple SAM sites were tracking them, and she could see on her displays that several systems had achieved lock-on. The mountainous terrain that provided cover also limited escape routes, creating a tactical nightmare. Viper 3, I'm spiked. The voice of Captain Williams crackled over the radio, indicating that a missile system had locked onto his aircraft. Sam launch, Sam launch! From her position high above the battlefield, Sarah could see the white smoke trail of a surface-to-air missile climbing rapidly toward Williams's F-16. He was executing evasive maneuvers and deploying countermeasures, but the missile was tracking true. At the same time, 2 more SAM sites were preparing to engage other aircraft in the formation. The ground assault team was rappelling from their helicopters directly into what was now clearly an ambush. Small arms fire was erupting from multiple positions around the compound, and Sarah could see muzzle flashes from weapons that intelligence had insisted weren't there. The Special Operations Forces were skilled and experienced, but they were outnumbered and caught in an expertly planned trap. Viper lead, request immediate permission to engage SAM sites, Sarah transmitted, her finger hovering over the weapons release controls. Viper 7, negative. Maintain high cover. We need to extract the ground team first. Sarah gritted her teeth in frustration. Every instinct told her that waiting was the wrong choice. The longer they delayed engaging the air defense network, the more dangerous the situation would become. But she was bound by military discipline and the chain of command, even when she disagreed with the tactical decisions being made. Captain Williams successfully evaded the first missile, but his aircraft had taken battle damage from exploding shrapnel. Viper lead, Viper 3. I've got hydraulic warnings and electrical problems. Need to egress immediately. Viper 3 cleared to egress. Make heading 090 for emergency recovery. As Williams's damaged fighter limped away from the battle area, the remaining 5 F-16s found themselves facing an increasingly desperate situation. The ground team was pinned down by heavy fire, calling for immediate close air support. But every time the fighters descended to attack altitude, they exposed themselves to the coordinated surface-to-air missile threat. Viper 2, SAM launch. Another missile streaked upward from the valley floor, forcing Lieutenant Martinez into violent evasive maneuvers. I'm defensive! Sarah's radar picture showed the full scope of the enemy's preparation. They had positioned 6 separate air defense systems in a coordinated network, creating overlapping coverage that made it nearly impossible for the F-16s to operate at low altitude. The enemy had studied coalition tactics and prepared accordingly, turning the attack into a carefully orchestrated ambush. From the ground, the Special Operations Team leader's voice came over the radio with barely controlled urgency. Viper lead, Ground Team Alpha. We're taking heavy casualties down here. We need immediate air support or we're going to lose this entire element. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Sarah could see on her displays that the enemy was bringing additional forces into the battle area. Vehicle convoys were moving along mountain roads toward the compound, reinforcing what was already a superior defensive position. Time was running out for both the ground team and the F-16 still trapped in the valley below. Viper lead, Viper 7, Sarah transmitted. I have a clear view of the entire battlefield from up here. The SAM sites are positioned in a coordinated network, but I can see gaps in their coverage. If I can identify safe attack corridors, the formation might be able to engage effectively. Viper 7, stand by. There was a long pause as Harrison considered his options. All Viper aircraft, Viper 7 is now designated Tactical Coordinator. Follow her vectors for SAM avoidance. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. 6 aircraft, multiple ground personnel, and the success of a critical mission now depended on her ability to read the battlefield and guide her fellow pilots safely through an expertly designed trap. From her elevated position, Sarah could see the entire battlefield with perfect clarity. The enemy air defense network formed a deadly web across the valley floor, but her unique vantage point revealed something that the other pilots couldn't see from their lower altitude. The SAM sites were positioned to create overlapping fields of fire, but the mountainous terrain created natural corridors where aircraft could approach without being detected or engaged. All Viper aircraft. This is Viper 7, Sarah transmitted, her voice calm despite the chaos erupting below. I'm tracking 6 active SAM sites in a defensive ring around the target. The terrain is masking 3 natural approach corridors that should allow safe passage to attack positions. She quickly analyzed the enemy positions, using her aircraft's advanced sensors to map the threat envelopes of each surface-to-air missile system. Years of training and combat experience allowed her to process the complex tactical picture rapidly. identifying weaknesses in what appeared to be an impenetrable defense. Viper 4 and Viper 5, I need you to approach from the northeast canyon. Stay below ridgeline level until you reach reference point Alpha. The SAM coverage has a gap there due to terrain masking. Viper 4 copies. Heading northeast. Viper 5 with you. Sarah watched the two F-16s begin their approach, using the natural terrain features to avoid detection by the enemy air defense systems. Her heart pounded as she guided them through the narrow canyon, knowing that a single mistake in her calculations could send them directly into a missile engagement zone. Meanwhile, the ground team was fighting for their lives in an increasingly desperate situation. The Special Operations Forces had managed to establish a defensive perimeter around their insertion point, but they were vastly outnumbered and taking casualties. Their radio calls were becoming more urgent with each passing minute. Viper Lead, Ground Team Alpha. We've got wounded and need immediate extraction. Can you clear us a path to the landing zone? Ground Team Alpha working on it. Stand by for close air support. Sarah continued coordinating the attack, directing Viper 2 and Viper 6 to approach from the southwest ridge while maintaining awareness of all active threats in the area. The SA-8 system that had first revealed the trap was still active and hunting for targets, its radar beam sweeping across the sky in search of coalition aircraft. Viper 2, hold position at reference point Bravo, Sarah instructed. SAM site bearing 270 is active and scanning your area. Wait for my signal before proceeding. She studied her displays intently, watching the enemy radar patterns and looking for windows of opportunity. The SAM operators were experienced and disciplined, maintaining overlapping coverage while conserving their missiles for high-probability shots. They knew that coalition air power was their primary threat and had prepared accordingly. Viper 7, Viper Lead, Harrison's voice came over the radio. What's your assessment of the situation? Viper Lead, the enemy has prepared a sophisticated ambush using coordinated air defenses. They're waiting for us to commit to low-altitude attacks before engaging with overwhelming firepower. But I can see safe approach routes that will allow us to neutralize the SAM sites one by one. The key insight came to Sarah as she watched the enemy defensive pattern. The SAM sites were positioned to protect the main compound, but they were also protecting each other through overlapping coverage zones. If she could guide the F-16s to attack the outermost sites first, it would create gaps in the defensive network that could be exploited to reach the inner targets. All Viper aircraft, new plan, Sarah transmitted. We're going to attack the SAM network systematically, starting with the outer ring. Viper 4 and 5, I'm clearing you hot on the SA-8 site at grid reference 41SMQ12345-67890. Viper 4, target acquired. Laser spot on. Viper 5, I have the target, ready to deliver. Sarah watched as the two F-16s approached their target through the terrain-masked corridor she had identified. The SA-8 site was positioned on a small plateau, its radar antenna rotating steadily as it searched for targets. The enemy operators had no idea that death was approaching from their blind spot. Viper 4, cleared hot. Viper 5, cleared hot. 2 GBU-12 laser-guided bombs fell from the F-16s and tracked precisely to their target. The SA-8 system disappeared in a massive explosion that sent smoke and debris high into the morning sky. Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction as she watched the first piece of the enemy defense network collapse. Good hits, she called. One SAM site down. Viper 4 and 5, egress northeast and climb to safe altitude. But the enemy response was immediate and coordinated. The remaining SAM sites shifted their positioning to compensate for the loss of the SA-8, and additional anti-aircraft guns opened fire from concealed positions around the compound. The trap was designed with multiple layers of defense, and destroying one element only triggered the activation of backup systems. Viper 2, Viper 6, the northwestern SAM site is now isolated. Sarah continued her coordination. Approach from the southwest ridge and engage at reference point Charlie. As she guided the next attack, Sarah noticed something troubling on her radar display. Multiple aircraft signatures were approaching from the east, flying low and fast toward the battle area. She quickly adjusted her sensors for a closer look and felt her stomach tighten. Enemy fighters were inbound, likely called in to support the ground defenses. All Viper aircraft, be advised. Multiple hostile aircraft approaching from the east, estimated 6 to 8 fighters. Looks like MiG-29s at low altitude. The tactical situation had just become exponentially more complex. Not only did the F-16 formation have to deal with sophisticated surface-to-air defenses, but they now faced the prospect of air-to-air combat, while operating in confined terrain with limited maneuvering room. Viper led. "Recommend we accelerate the timeline," Sarah transmitted. "The longer we stay in this valley, the more dangerous our position becomes." Viper 7 agreed. "All aircraft expedite your attacks and prepare for air-to-air engagement," Sarah continued to coordinate the systematic destruction of the enemy air defense network while simultaneously tracking the approaching hostile fighters. Her position high above the battlefield gave her the perfect vantage point to manage both threats. But she was acutely aware that her single aircraft and light weapons load would be of limited use if the situation devolved into a major air battle. The ground team's situation was becoming increasingly desperate as enemy reinforcements poured into the area. What had started as a surgical strike against a high-value target had become a full-scale battle for survival, with coalition forces fighting against overwhelming odds in hostile territory. The enemy fighters were closing fast, and Sarah's radar showed them splitting into two groups as they approached the battle area. 4 MiG-29s were climbing to engage the F-16s at altitude, while the remaining aircraft stayed low to provide air support for the ground forces. The tactical complexity of the situation was beyond anything Sarah had encountered in her previous combat missions. Viper lead. "Hostile fighters are splitting up," Sarah reported. 4 climbing to 20,000 feet bearing 080. 4 remaining at low altitude, probably configured for ground attack. "All Viper aircraft, Viper lead. We need to finish this quickly. Viper 2 and 6, prosecute your attack on the northwestern SAM site immediately. Everyone else, prepare for air-to-air engagement." Sarah watched Viper 2 and Viper 6 approach their target through the corridor she had identified, but the enemy had learned from the first attack. As the F-16s descended toward their attack position, multiple anti-aircraft gun positions opened fire, filling the sky with deadly streams of tracers. The enemy was determined not to lose another SAM site without a fight. Viper 2 taking fire from AAA positions. "The whole valley is lit up down here." Viper 6, "I see gun positions on both sides of the ridge. This is getting hot." From her high perch, Sarah could see the full scope of the enemy defensive preparations. Anti-aircraft guns were positioned throughout the valley, many of them concealed until the moment coalition aircraft came within range. The enemy had prepared for exactly this type of attack and had the firepower to back up their ambush. "Viper 2, Viper 6, abort your attack," Sarah called urgently. "The gun positions are too concentrated. You'll be flying into a wall of fire." But it was too late. Viper 2 was already committed to his bombing run, diving toward the SAM site through a storm of anti-aircraft fire. Sarah watched helplessly as tracers converged on the F-16's flight path, knowing that pilot Captain Johnson was flying through hell to complete his mission. "Viper 2 bombs away," Johnson called, his voice tight with concentration as he fought to maintain control of his aircraft through the defensive fire. The laser-guided bomb found its target, destroying the second SAM site in a spectacular explosion. But Viper 2 had taken significant battle damage during the attack run. Sarah could see fuel streaming from the aircraft as Johnson pulled up from his bombing run, and his radio transmissions indicated multiple system failures. "Viper lead. Viper 2. I've got major hydraulic failure. Fuel leak and my flight controls are getting heavy. I need to egress immediately." Viper 2 cleared to egress. "Make best speed for emergency recovery." As Johnson's damaged fighter headed for home, the air-to-air threat materialized in deadly earnest. The 4 high-altitude MiG-29s had reached engagement range and were launching missiles at the remaining F-16s in the formation. Sarah's radar warning receiver screamed as multiple missile launches lit up her display. "Vampire! Vampire!" Lieutenant Martinez called from Viper 5. "Multiple missiles in the air. All aircraft defensive maneuvers," Harrison ordered. "Engage hostile fighters." Sarah found herself in the unique position of being above the air-to-air engagement, while simultaneously trying to coordinate the continuing ground attack mission. The enemy fighters were aggressive and well-trained, pressing their numerical advantage against the smaller F-16 formation. "Viper 7, this is Viper lead. I need you to maintain overwatch and continue coordinating the SAM suppression." "We'll handle the fighters," Viper lead, copy. "Be advised, I'm tracking 2 more SAM sites that need to be neutralized before the ground team can be extracted." The tactical situation had become incredibly complex. Sarah was managing a three-dimensional battle that included air-to-air combat, surface-to-air missile threats, anti-aircraft gun positions, and close air support for the ground team. Her training had prepared her for complex scenarios, but nothing quite like this. From the ground, the Special Operations Team's radio calls were becoming increasingly desperate. They had been fighting for over an hour against superior numbers, and their ammunition was running low. Several team members had been wounded, and their defensive perimeter was shrinking under constant pressure. Viper Lead, Ground Team Alpha. We're running out of time down here. We've got multiple wounded and can't hold this position much longer. Need immediate close air support on enemy positions surrounding our perimeter. Sarah could see the ground battle unfolding below her through her targeting pod. The Special Operations Forces were completely surrounded, fighting from hastily prepared positions against an enemy that seemed to have unlimited reinforcements. Enemy vehicles were moving freely through the area, bringing fresh troops and supplies to maintain pressure on the coalition forces. Viper Lead, I can see the ground situation clearly, Sarah transmitted. The enemy has established 3 main firing positions around the ground team's perimeter. If I can guide precision strikes on those positions, it might give them enough breathing room for extraction. Viper 7, proceed with close air support coordination. All other aircraft continued to engage hostile fighters. Above her, the air-to-air battle was reaching its climax. Lieutenant Martinez in Viper 5 had successfully engaged one of the MiG-29s with an AIM-120 missile. But 2 more enemy fighters were pressing their attack against the outnumbered F-16s. The dogfight was taking place directly over the battlefield, adding another layer of complexity to an already chaotic situation. Sarah began coordinating precision strikes on the enemy positions surrounding the ground team, using her superior vantage point to identify targets and guide the remaining F-16s through safe approach corridors. But she was acutely aware that her aircraft carried only a single laser-guided bomb, limiting her ability to directly contribute to the ground attack mission. Viper 4, I need you to engage the enemy position at grid reference 41 SMQ 13579, 24680. That's a heavy machine gun position that's pinning down the ground team's northern flank. Viper 4, roger. I have eyes on the target. As Viper 4 approached its target, Sarah noticed something on her radar display that made her blood run cold. One of the MiG-29s had broken away from the main dogfight and was diving toward the valley floor, clearly intent on attacking the helpless ground team with rockets and cannon fire. Viper Lead, break off one of the MiGs. He's going after the ground team. Viper 7, all aircraft are engaged. Can you intercept? Sarah looked at her weapons display. She had 2 air-to-air missiles and 1 bomb remaining. The diving MiG-29 was outside the engagement envelope of her air-to-air missiles. But if she could position herself correctly, she might be able to intercept the enemy fighter before it could attack the ground team. For the first time since the mission began, the backup aircraft was about to become the primary player in a life-or-death situation. Sarah pushed her F-16 into a steep dive, trading altitude for airspeed as she raced to intercept the enemy fighter before it could attack the ground team. The MiG-29 had a significant head start and was diving at maximum speed toward the valley floor, but Sarah's higher starting altitude gave her a crucial advantage in the geometry of the intercept. Her radar locked onto the enemy fighter as she accelerated through Mach 1.2, the F-16's afterburner consuming fuel at an alarming rate. The targeting computer calculated intercept solutions while Sarah flew by instinct and experience, using every trick she had learned to close the gap with the hostile aircraft. Viper 7, Fox 2, Sarah called as she launched an AIM-9 Sidewinder missile at maximum range. The infrared-guided missile streaked away from her aircraft, its seeker head locked onto the heat signature of the MiG's twin engines, but the enemy pilot was skilled and experienced. He immediately began defensive maneuvers, deploying flares and chaff while pulling his aircraft through violent turns designed to break the missile's lock. The MiG's twin-engine configuration gave it excellent thrust-to-weight ratio, allowing for aggressive maneuvering that challenged the Sidewinder's tracking capability. Sarah watched the missile chase the enemy fighter through a series of barrel rolls and diving turns, the 2 aircraft dancing a deadly ballet against the backdrop of the Afghan mountains. For several seconds, it appeared the Sidewinder would find its target, but the MiG pilot's defensive measures finally succeeded in spoofing the missile's guidance system. Damn, Sarah muttered as the missile lost lock and exploded harmlessly against a mountainside. The MiG-29 immediately resumed its attack dive toward the ground team, now only seconds away from weapons range. Sarah could see the enemy pilot lining up for a strafing run that would devastate the exposed Special Operations Forces. Her second air-to-air missile was an AIM-120 AMRAAM, designed for beyond visual range engagements. But the close proximity and high closure rate made it a questionable choice. Instead, Sarah made a decision that went against every rule in the tactical manual. She continued her dive, rapidly closing the distance with the enemy fighter while simultaneously maneuvering to position herself between the MiG and the ground team. If she couldn't shoot down the enemy aircraft, she would physically block its attack run. "Viper 7, what are you doing?" Harrison's voice crackled over the radio with alarm. "Preventing a ground attack," Sarah replied tersely, her full attention focused on the rapidly developing situation. The MiG-29 was now within cannon range of the ground team, and Sarah could see rocket pods beneath its wings preparing to fire. In desperation, she selected her single GBU-12 laser-guided bomb and locked onto the enemy fighter with her targeting pod. It was an unprecedented use of an air-to-ground weapon, but she was out of conventional options. The enemy pilot seemed to sense the threat at the last moment, breaking off his attack run and pulling up sharply to avoid Sarah's intercepting aircraft. The two fighters flashed past each other at a combined closure rate of over 1,000 miles per hour, separated by less than 100 feet of empty air. Sarah immediately reversed course and pursued the MiG-29 as it climbed away from the valley floor. The enemy pilot had lost his opportunity to attack the ground team, but he was now focused on defending himself against Sarah's aggressive pursuit. The two aircraft began a vertical climb, afterburners blazing as they fought for altitude and position. "Viper 7, you've got another MiG coming down on you from the north," Martinez called from Viper 5. "He's trying to sandwich you." Sarah's situational awareness had been so focused on the immediate threat that she had lost track of the broader air battle. Now she found herself caught between two enemy fighters, with limited fuel and only one air-to-air missile remaining. The tactical situation had shifted dramatically, and she was no longer the hunter but the hunted. The second MiG-29 was diving toward her from above, attempting to achieve a firing solution while she was engaged with the first enemy fighter. Sarah found herself in the worst possible position for air-to-air combat, caught in a vertical climb with hostile aircraft above and below her. Her training took over as she immediately rolled inverted and pulled through into a split S maneuver, using gravity to help accelerate away from the threat, while simultaneously changing her flight path to complicate the enemy's targeting solution. The violent maneuver subjected her to crushing G-forces, but it successfully broke the attack geometry of both enemy fighters. Viper lead. "Viper 7, I'm engaged with two MiGs and need assistance." "Viper 7, help is coming." "Viper 4 is disengaging from ground attack to assist." Sarah continued maneuvering defensively, while the two MiG-29s attempted to coordinate their attacks. The enemy pilots were clearly experienced in air-to-air combat and were using classic tactics to overwhelm a single defender. One fighter would force her into defensive maneuvers, while the other positioned for a killing shot. Her fuel state was becoming critical after the high-speed intercept and extended maneuvering. The F-16's internal fuel capacity was limited, and she had been burning fuel at maximum rate during the engagement. Soon she would have to choose between continuing the fight and ensuring she had enough fuel to return to base. "Viper 4, where are you?" Sarah called as she pulled hard to avoid a missile shot from one of the MiGs. Viper 4 coming in from the west. "I have a lock on the northern MiG." The tactical situation suddenly shifted again as Viper 4's AIM-120 missile found its target, destroying one of the MiG-29s in a spectacular fireball. But the victory came at a cost. The remaining enemy fighter immediately disengaged and fled toward the east, leaving the valley clear of hostile aircraft but with the ground battle still raging below. "Good kill." "Viper 4, Sarah called, relief evident in her voice. "Viper 7, that was some impressive flying," Viper 4 replied. "I saw you go head-to-head with that MiG over the ground team. That took serious guts." Sarah looked down at the battlefield below, where the Special Operations Forces were still fighting for their lives against superior numbers. The air-to-air threat had been neutralized, but the ground team remained in desperate need of close air support. Several SAM sites were still active and enemy reinforcements continued to pour into the area. "All Viper aircraft, this is Viper 7, Sarah transmitted. The air threat is clear, but we still have a mission to complete. The ground team needs immediate support, and we have remaining SAM sites to neutralize. Her actions had prevented a massacre of the ground team, but the mission was far from over. The systematic destruction of the enemy air defense network still needed to be completed, and the Special Operations Forces required close air support to survive long enough for extraction. Sarah's backup role had evolved into mission-critical leadership, and the weight of responsibility was heavy on her shoulders. With the immediate air-to-air threat eliminated, Sarah refocused her attention on the deteriorating ground situation. From her elevated position, she could see that the Special Operations team was completely surrounded and taking casualties. Enemy forces had established a tight perimeter around the coalition forces, using the terrain to their advantage while pouring devastating fire into the trapped Americans. Ground Team Alpha, Viper 7, Sarah called to the Special Operations Commander. I have eyes on your position. What's your current status? Viper 7, Ground Team Alpha. We have 3 wounded, ammunition running low, and enemy forces closing from all directions. We need immediate fire support on enemy positions at grid references. I'm about to transmit. Sarah received the grid coordinates and immediately began coordinating precision strikes with the remaining F-16s in the formation. But the tactical situation was complicated by the fact that enemy and friendly forces were now intermixed at close range, requiring extreme precision to avoid fratricide incidents. All Viper aircraft, be advised that danger close procedures are now in effect, Sarah announced. Enemy forces are within 50 meters of friendly positions. All attacks must be precisely coordinated and visually confirmed. She studied the battlefield through her targeting pod, identifying enemy machine gun nests, mortar positions, and troop concentrations that were threatening the ground team. The enemy had positioned their forces expertly, using natural cover and concealment to maximize their effectiveness while minimizing their exposure to air attack. Viper 5, I need you to engage the enemy mortar position at grid reference 41S MQ 1.682-35791. That's approximately 75 meters northeast of the friendly position. Use your 20mm cannon for precision fire. Viper 5, copy. I have eyes on the target. Mortar position identified. Sarah watched as Viper 5 rolled in for a strafing run, the F-16's M61 Vulcan cannon ripping through the enemy position with devastating accuracy. The mortar team that had been raining indirect fire on the ground team was eliminated in seconds, providing immediate relief to the besieged Special Operations Forces. Good hits. Viper 5. Ground Team Alpha, that mortar position is neutralized. Viper 7. Ground Team Alpha, thank you. That was our biggest threat, but we still have machine gun positions on our eastern flank that are keeping us pinned down. Sarah continued to coordinate precise attacks against enemy positions while simultaneously monitoring the broader tactical situation. Intelligence reports indicated that additional enemy reinforcements were en route to the battle area, including heavy weapons and possibly armored vehicles. Time was running out for a successful extraction. Viper lead, we need to accelerate the timeline for ground team extraction, Sarah transmitted. Enemy reinforcements are moving toward the battle area, and our window for safe extraction is closing rapidly. Viper 7, copy. All aircraft, focus on clearing enemy positions around the landing zone. We need to create a safe corridor for the extraction helicopters. But as Sarah continued to coordinate the close air support mission, her fuel gauge showed a critical reading. The high-speed intercept of the enemy fighter and extended maneuvering during the air-to-air engagement had consumed most of her remaining fuel. She was now faced with a difficult decision: continue supporting the mission or return to base before running out of fuel. Viper lead, Viper 7. I'm showing critically low fuel state. I need to make a decision about remaining on station. Viper 7, what's your current fuel state? Sarah checked her gauges carefully. 15 minutes of fuel remaining, assuming normal cruise configuration. Less if I need to maneuver aggressively or use afterburner. There was a long pause before Harrison responded. Viper 7, your call. You've already done more than anyone expected. Sarah looked down at the battlefield where American Special Operations Forces were fighting for their lives. The mission was at a critical juncture, and her unique position and situational awareness made her an invaluable asset for coordinating the complex close air support requirements. But staying too long could mean running out of fuel before reaching a suitable airfield. Viper lead, I'm staying. These guys need all the help they can get. She made the decision to remain on station despite her fuel situation, knowing that her oversight and coordination capabilities were crucial for the successful extraction of the ground team. It was a calculated risk that could potentially cost her life. But it was the right decision for the mission and for her fellow warriors on the ground. Viper 4, I need you to engage the heavy machine gun position at grid, reference 41S MQ, 1 Fiend 793, 46802. That's the position that's preventing the ground team from moving to the extraction landing zone. As Viper 4 rolled in for his attack, Sarah noticed movement on her radar display that caused immediate alarm. Multiple helicopter signatures were approaching from the south, flying at low altitude and high speed. But these weren't the extraction helicopters that had been planned for the mission. All aircraft, be advised. Multiple rotary wing aircraft approaching from the south, checking identification. Sarah quickly switched to her air-to-air radar mode and attempted to identify the incoming helicopters. What she discovered made her blood run cold. The helicopters were enemy attack aircraft, armed with rockets and missiles and heading directly for the battle area. All Viper aircraft, hostile helicopters inbound from the south. Count 4 attack helicopters, probably Mi-24 Hinds. They're heading directly for the ground team's position. The tactical situation had just become exponentially worse. Not only were the Special Operations Forces surrounded by ground forces, but they were about to face attack from heavily armed enemy helicopters. The Mi-24 Hind was a formidable weapons platform, capable of devastating any ground force caught in the open. Ground Team Alpha, be advised. Enemy attack helicopters inbound to your position. You need to find hard cover immediately. Viper 7, Ground Team Alpha. We're in the open with wounded personnel. We can't move to hard cover positions. Sarah realized that the ground team was completely vulnerable to the incoming helicopter attack. The Special Operations Forces had been focused on the ground threat and had no effective means of defending themselves against aerial assault. Without immediate intervention, the enemy helicopters would massacre the trapped Americans. Her fuel situation was now desperate, but there was no choice. Sarah selected her last air-to-air missile and began maneuvering to intercept the enemy helicopters before they could reach attack position. She was one aircraft against 4 heavily armed attack helicopters, operating on fumes with no margin for error. Viper lead, Viper 7 engaging enemy helicopters. All other aircraft, continue close air support for the ground team. As she dove toward the approaching helicopters, Sarah knew that this would likely be her final contribution to the mission. But sometimes a single aircraft in the right place at the right time could change the entire outcome of a battle. Sarah dove toward the enemy helicopters with her fuel gauge showing critical levels. The 4 Mi-24 Hinds were flying in tactical formation, approaching the battlefield at maximum speed with their weapon systems armed and ready. She had one AIM-120 AMRAAM missile remaining and approximately 8 minutes of fuel before she would be forced to land immediately or risk flaming out. The geometry of the intercept was challenging. The helicopters were flying low and fast through the mountain valleys, using the terrain to mask their approach until the last possible moment. Sarah had to position herself for a shot while simultaneously avoiding the concentrated firepower of 4 heavily armed attack aircraft. Viper 7, Fox 3, Sarah called as she launched her final air-to-air missile at the lead helicopter. The AIM-120 guided true to its target, striking the lead Mi-24 and destroying it in a massive fireball that lit up the mountain valley. But the remaining 3 helicopters immediately scattered and began defensive maneuvers, their pilots clearly experienced in combat operations. With no air-to-air missiles remaining, Sarah was now armed only with her 20mm cannon against 3 attack helicopters. The tactical situation seemed hopeless, but she refused to abandon the ground team to their fate. She pulled her F-16 into a tight turn and began a strafing run against the nearest helicopter. The enemy pilots were skilled and aggressive, immediately turning to engage Sarah's aircraft with their own weapons systems. Rocket-propelled grenades and cannon fire filled the air as the helicopters attempted to overwhelm the lone F-16 with concentrated firepower. Sarah found herself in a deadly dance with multiple opponents, using her aircraft's superior speed and maneuverability to avoid the devastating defensive fire. Her cannon fire raked across one of the Mi-24s, causing visible damage and forcing the pilot into emergency maneuvers. But the helicopter remained airborne and combat capable, and Sarah's ammunition was limited. She had perhaps 30 seconds of cannon fire remaining before her weapons were exhausted. Viper lead, Viper 7. I'm Winchester on missiles and low on cannon ammunition, still engaging 3 hostile helicopters. Viper 7, disengage immediately. Your fuel state is critical. But Sarah ignored the order to withdraw. Below her, she could see the Special Operations team moving toward the extraction landing zone under covering fire from the remaining F-16s. The extraction helicopters were finally approaching from the west, but they would never survive if the enemy attack helicopters reached the battle area. She continued her aggressive attacks against the Mi-24s, using hit-and-run tactics to maximize damage while conserving ammunition. Her fuel gauge was now showing less than 5 minutes remaining, but the enemy helicopters were still a threat to both the ground team and the incoming extraction aircraft. Ground Team Alpha. Friendly extraction helicopters are 2 minutes out, Harrison announced over the radio. Prepare for immediate extraction. Viper 7, you need to egress now, came an urgent transmission from Viper 4. Your fuel state is beyond critical. Sarah's engine began showing warning lights as her fuel supply reached minimum levels. She was now faced with an impossible choice. Abandon the mission and attempt an emergency landing, or continue fighting until her aircraft ran out of fuel. The decision was made for her when one of the remaining Mi-24s achieved a firing position against the extraction helicopters. Negative on egress, Sarah transmitted. Enemy helicopter is engaging extraction flight. She rolled her F-16 into a final attack run, diving directly toward the Mi-24 that was firing rockets at the incoming rescue helicopters. Her cannon shells struck the helicopter's engine compartment, causing catastrophic damage that sent the aircraft spinning into the mountainside. But the engagement had consumed her final reserves. Sarah's engine began to wind down as the fuel flow stopped, and she found herself in a powerless aircraft at low altitude in hostile territory. The F-16 began to descend rapidly as she looked desperately for a suitable emergency landing site. Mayday, Mayday, Viper 7. Flame out, attempting emergency landing. Below her, she could see a relatively flat area near a dried riverbed that might be suitable for a deadstick landing. She configured her aircraft for maximum glide ratio and began setting up for what would likely be a fatal crash landing in enemy-controlled territory. Viper 7, Ground Team Alpha. We're extracted and safe. Thank you for everything. The transmission from the ground team leader brought a moment of satisfaction despite her desperate situation. The mission had been successful. The Special Operations Forces were safe, and the enemy's carefully planned ambush had been defeated. Her sacrifice had not been in vain. As Sarah prepared for impact, she reflected on the events of the morning. She had started the mission as a backup pilot in a supposedly non-essential role, but circumstances had thrust her into the center of a complex and dangerous operation. Her unique position and tactical awareness had proven crucial for the mission's success. The F-16 touched down hard on the rocky terrain, bouncing and sliding before finally coming to rest against a boulder field. Sarah was bruised and shaken but alive. As she activated her survival radio and prepared for a potential combat rescue mission, she could hear the sound of helicopters approaching from the west. Viper 7. This is Rescue 1. We have your position and are inbound for pickup. Stay low and be ready to move. 3 days later, Sarah sat in the squadron debrief room as intelligence officers and mission commanders analyzed every aspect of the operation. The official after-action report would document how a supposedly minor backup role had evolved into mission-critical leadership that saved multiple lives and achieved strategic objectives. Captain Martinez, the squadron commander said as the debrief concluded, your actions during this mission exemplify the highest standards of military aviation. The tactical coordination you provided and your willingness to sacrifice your aircraft to protect ground forces will be recognized appropriately. Sarah nodded quietly, still processing the events of that morning. She had learned that in combat, there were no small roles or non-essential personnel. Every position mattered, and sometimes the person designated as backup became the most important player on the field. The mission report would officially log her as the pilot who provided mission-critical tactical coordination and close air support, but Sarah knew the real story was more complex. She had been in the right place at the right time with the skills and determination to make a difference when it mattered most. As she walked out of the debrief room, Sarah reflected on the unpredictable nature of combat operations. No amount of planning could anticipate every contingency, and success often depended on individual initiative and courage when faced with impossible circumstances. Her Vector had indeed saved the squadron, though she would always remember the cost of that success and the teammates who had fought beside her in the mountains of Afghanistan.